Joining us now, Christian Kachel, an Iraq and Afghanistan veteran who Skypes in from Washington, D.C. Christian, as a veteran, what was your first reaction when you heard this report was going to be released?
Hi, JD. Great to be here.
Thank you.
My first thought was I was very upset, and I think from what we see, what was actually released, I think it's abundantly clear that it's a partisan political document at $40 million expense to the taxpayer, both through its findings, its lack of bipartisanship, and the decision of its release during the Jonathan Gruber congressional testimony.
So as a veteran Christian, was this an act of recklessness?
I think it was more an act of political partisanship, and they weren't necessarily thinking about the repercussions. That was secondary in their thinking.
Right. If you were serving, though, how would you be feeling right now?
Well, especially if I was either in the State Department serving overseas or one of the increasing number of American forces serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, I would be very upset given that we are, I believe, unnecessarily riling up an already upset enemy at us.
Christian, would you go so far as to say you would feel betrayed if you were on active duty right now?
If I was serving overseas right now, I would certainly be highly upset with Ms. Feinstein and others who championed this release, and I certainly would not think that those individuals had our best interest at heart.
Christian, you are the author of a new book entitled Spoils of Olympus, By the Sword. Let's talk about this transition to book writing. What inspired you to become an author?
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to talk with your audience about it. I've always been interested in this time, both studied it through in college and also just on my own time. And given my background, I thought that there's always been a lot of books, a lot of novels, a lot of nonfiction written about Greek antiquity and Alexander the Great. What there isn't a lot of, though, in the terms of fiction, is stories that occur during the time immediately following his untimely death. And I thought that I could really put a story together that not only lets the readers understand this much looked over important part of our history, but also gives them a lot of entertainment value as well.
Christian, are you drawing from any of your own personal experiences in this book?
Well, some of my time in Afghanistan and Iraq, I was actually serving in a number of places that are written about in the book, and that Alexander and his forces did go through places such as Baghdad and up into Kurdistan and into places in Afghanistan along the Pakistan border. Yes.
So, Christian, it would seem to me that there are parallels even with modern warfighting and the armies of antiquity. What parallels, what commonalities exist between the modern military and those of so very long ago?
Well, I think one thing for certain is the complexity of tribal warfare that you see in this region, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. Another constant that I think is, back then, if they were going to commit to something, they were in it to win it. What we see in America's efforts with ISIS right now, both in Iraq and in the bombing campaign in Syria, it seems that we're doing the least amount possible that is politically acceptable to the American people after the beheadings of 2 American journalists.
So you're saying the least amount possible. What do you think that we should be doing?
Well, there's a number of things. First and foremost, we should be upping our bombing campaign. If you compare what we're doing now with how we started the Desert Storm or Operation Iraqi Freedom, the amount of airstrikes right now are pale in comparison to what we were doing back then. Second thing is we need to really start leaning on our NATO ally Turkey to be more involved in this fight. Those are 2 things right off the bat that we should be doing.
And I also think about something else. Back in antiquity, the marathon was established because of what happened at Thermopylae, right? The messenger is running 26 miles to give the news of the battle. With television and social media, And during my time in Iraq, it was like it was the first internet war, people writing home with the improved communications. In your view, Christian, has that changed public opinion about war? Are the American people more impatient to see things come to a close? Is the horror of war brought home through television and the internet?
I think it certainly has, JD. I think you bring up a good point. Certainly with the impatience part of it. I remember in 2003, in March, when we first invaded Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom, the news reports back then were that we were being stalled and that we were facing, harder than expected fighting, and that we were not making enough progress. Where in fact, if you looked at the pace we were making historically, it was one of the greatest offensive campaigns in military history in terms of how far we were able to go and the speed it took.
Christian, Secretary of State John Kerry said that we knew about ISIS about a decade ago, and he's saying we should not rule out troops on the ground. Do you agree with that?
Well, first of all, we already have troops on the ground. We have, and it's growing. It seems by each month. We're calling them advisors, but the numbers are growing, and they're starting to go into more and more dangerous places. I don't agree with ruling out anything that would be useful in combating ISIS. However, I don't believe that we need to have large-scale division or brigade-size elements running around the Iraqi desert again.
Christian Kachel, we thank you for your time once again. The name of your new book, Spoils of Olympus, By the Sword, looking back to post-Alexandrian times, I guess we can say, with the death of Alexander the Great and the constant of tribal warfare. And tribal warfare continues on this day in Afghanistan, where you serve so capably. Christian, for your service, for your new book, and for the time you spent with us today on America's Forum, we thank you for all those things.
Thank you, JD. Appreciate it.
Christian Kachel right there. And America's Forum continues following this Newsmax Now update.